Well, good afternoon or good morning, actually, depending on where you're at. My name is Logan McCoy, and I am the VP of Sales over here at CCB Technology. I would like to thank each one of you for taking the time today to join me in this webinar and presentation of Windows 10. I'm sure that for many of you, you have questions pertaining to Windows 10. What are the new features and benefits? What are the additions, and how is it licensed? And I'm sure you've seen the commercials or seen on web, how do I upgrade, right? And I hear there's this free upgrade out there. Am I eligible for it? And if so, how do I go from there and do it, right? So the one thing I want to say is that we've only got 30 minutes together here. And so I'm not actually going to be running through a demo of Windows 10 itself. And the reason being is just because I want to make sure you get all this information in this brief time that we have. If you're a little disappointed, don't worry, because what we're going to be doing in about a month actually is a full-length demo of Windows 10 so that you can actually see for yourself what it is, what those features are, what those features look like, and how you can take advantage of them from there, right? So let's actually get into a little bit of the agenda for the day. So the first thing I actually want to go ahead and do is I want to talk a little bit about who CCB is. For many of you, I know that you've worked with us for a number of years, but for some of you, you might be new to the partnership with CCB. I want to make sure that you know who we are and how you can best utilize us. Then I want to actually get into why Windows 10. What are those new features? What are those benefits? What are those major things that as an end user and as a leader in your organization, you want to be aware of? I then want to get into Windows 10 itself and what those additions are and how it's licensed. Because for you, it's going to be critical to know and to understand what those differences are and how to effectively navigate them, right? And then last but most assuredly not least, I want to talk about what Microsoft calls their Get Current Upgrade Plan. And this is what I was just referencing earlier, where if you've seen those commercials or what's on the web, this ability for you to take it within the first year and actually upgrade to Windows 10 for free. So I'm going to talk about that last. And then at the very last, what I'd like to do is save maybe around 5 minutes for Q&A. I've timed myself, hopefully, to make sure I stay within that 25 minutes here, so I hope not to go over. But what I would just say to that point as well is if you have a question, don't wait to enter it until the end. Enter it while the presentation's going on, because what I'll do is I'll just take them in order of appearance then, as they've kind of been entered. And I'll get through as many as I can, as I said, with about the few remaining minutes that we'll have at the end of this presentation. Just a little bit about who CCB is. So we were started back in 1991, actually, and we were started by a gentleman whose name is Chris Booth. And Chris really had the heart and the mission to serve the nonprofit community. See, Chris had come from the corporate space, and he had done a lot with educational institutions as well, and so he knew that different organizations were receiving discounts or benefits from large tech companies for whether it was software or hardware purchases. And so he wanted to take that same premise and create it for the nonprofit community. And so the very first thing he did is he actually went to Microsoft, and he pitched his guts out, and he created the Microsoft Charity Licensing Program. And so for many of you, if you're a nonprofit, you're able to take advantage of that program from what Chris did back in 1991 by creating that. And after he created the one with Microsoft, he went and did the same thing with Adobe and Symantec, with McAfee and VMware, all down the list, right? And so then after that time period, usually about a few years afterwards is what Chris says, is that a lot of our customers started coming back to us and actually saying, so we work with you guys on the software procurement, and you guys are doing great because you're giving us the technology that we need at a price that we can afford, but can you help us with the hardware side? And so Chris did the exact same thing for desktops and laptops, for servers, for networking devices, because he did it with vendors like Dell and HP, with Lenovo, with Apple, and Cisco, right? All down the line in that same kind of vein. But it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago where Chris's son, Patrick, who's now the president of the organization, really had the vision to expand what CCB was doing, because he saw the need that was coming from a lot of our customers that were saying, you guys have done great. For 20 plus years, you've done a phenomenal job in serving us by helping us get the software and hardware, but we need help now. We need help managing our IT infrastructure. We need help implementing this new technology. And so Patrick actually created this whole new division, which is now our services division, to help serve our nonprofit community. Now, the thing I like to stress as well is you've heard me say right here that I've stressed nonprofit a lot. But actually, it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago as well, about the same time we were creating the services division, that Patrick also wanted to expand the verticals of who we were serving. And so while much of our heartbeat is still for that nonprofit community, we work with corporate accounts all across the nation. We work with academic and government all over as well. And so we have customers that are in Dallas, that are in Florida, they're in Alaska, they're in Maine, California, everywhere in between, right? And so for us, in about the 25 years that we've been in business, we've served over 40,000 customers in all different types of verticals, right? And so I want to give this little brief intro about CCB because if you weren't aware of any of those things, please definitely leverage us for those because we want to be that one-stop shop for you. We want to give you the knowledge and the information that you need to make those informed decisions, which is the very reason why we're doing a webinar like this, to help you be effective in making the decisions that you need to, right? So Windows 10, I actually love this slide because I think it gives a really good data set of why Microsoft did some of the things they did when they made some changes in their new operating system, which is Windows 10, right? One of the things that I love the most about what Microsoft has done is they've really taken Windows 10 and made it focused or centered around what I would say a mobile-first or cloud-first type world, right? And you can see here that it's giving a lot of those statistics as they pertain to SMBs, which, by the way, just as a side, what that really means is if you have one user all the way up to 1,000 users, that's really how oftentimes we're defining an SMB, right? That can be in any kind of vertical. Now, we do ourselves work with enterprise organizations that are outside of that, but most of the organizations we work within actually fall within that range, right? But getting back to this data set here, the thing that I love is that it's really talking about how the marketplace and really the workforce itself has shifted in how it works, right? Saying that it's really become very much so mobile-centric. Even for myself, I know that I'm splitting a lot of my time between different locations. I'm on the road a lot. I'm going to our different locations that we have here just in Racine. And so for me, I would actually very much so consider myself a mobile worker, where 2 to 3 years ago, I was in the office and the same office every single day. So I can say I'm a part of that statistics where I see it changing, right? You can even say that it's not just changing from a mobile standpoint, but also a cloud standpoint, right? This ability and need that now that we're mobile, we still have to be able to access this data wherever we are. And that's really where cloud services are enabling us to effectively accomplish that and do that. Because it's no longer even just about actually accessing the data, is it? It's actually now being able to collaborate and take insights and run with it from that data, right? So you can see here the other interesting element is the devices that we're doing all of this on. We're still doing it on laptops, but the desktop market, I'm not going to say it's declining, but it's not growing at its rapid rate that it once was. And a big reason for that is because of tablets, right? And you can see that very interesting statistic that already for mobile users, 26% of the devices that they're using are tablet. They're touch-oriented, right? And so what does that really mean when we talk about Windows 10? Well, what it means is that what Microsoft has really tried to do is take Windows 10 and meet that changing workforce need, whether it's mobile-centric, cloud-centric, if it's based on the devices, right? And this is where Microsoft really has come out and said, this is why in us changing Windows 10 to make it in this kind of fashion, we can first say that we believe it's the best platform for the modern business. Because Microsoft would say that it's really designed for the modern world of those types of cloud services and mobility, right? And they say it's really because Windows 10 is simple to use and it's tightly integrated with the cloud, right? But the other thing that they would say is that it's great because it really fits on X number of devices, right? I mean, the number of devices out there already that are affordable and innovative to run Windows 10 on is, I'm not going to say there's an infinite number, but it's definitely hard to say that you're going to reach an end anytime soon. And the reason why I think that's so critical, actually, is because for your users and for your organization, you're not limited to a subset of devices that you have to run this on. You really get to pick and choose what's best for your workforce, what's best for your environment. And you get to choose that not just based on what's innovative pertaining to the devices, but also what fits within your budget. Now, a major thing that I think is very true for a lot of our organizations, especially for the IT managers, is that Windows 10, more than any other, is simple to set up and manage, right? Now, I say that, and I probably have some people on the other end, I'm sure, smiling because they've heard that before. And the thing I will say is that there are definitely a number of things that you have to be aware of when you're looking to upgrade. But that's why we want to inform you of these things, because if you have that knowledge, the ability to move your users from Windows 7 to Windows 8 is very easy. But behind the scenes of that, the ability to manage this across those platforms has significantly been simplified, which just means that your ability to manage becomes greater, which then means your ability to be productive and effective in what you're doing becomes better as well, right? Now, with every version that Microsoft releases for their Windows operating systems, they tout that this new operating system is the most secure, and they have data that backs that up. And I would say that Windows 10 is definitely a part of that same mantra. Microsoft is saying time and time again that Windows 10 is the most secure platform, the most secure operating system out there right now. And a major benefit that I will say is that Microsoft is taking a lot of those enterprise grade, enterprise quality type features, and they're actually distilling it down into such a way that it's actually relevant for smaller organizations, right? Where you can pick and choose and decide what actually you need to implement that is more of an enterprise grade type security feature while not having to do the others as well. And that's a major benefit to SMBs because oftentimes they can get lost in all these different types of enterprise features when really they just need to pick one or two. And that's a major benefit that Microsoft has rolled within that, right? But on top of that, not just being able to manage those enterprise features easily, are the features themselves, right? Whether that's at the operating system level or increased security within the browser, whether that has to do with increased features and functionality like things that have been around for a while, but adding to them like BitLocker and AppLocker, right? All those kinds of things that Microsoft is doing to make Windows 10 a better operating system for the modern workforce today. And so continuing with that theme really of that best platform for modern business and what that means. Well, from a user experience, what that really means is that it's going to be an easier transition for users that are running Windows 7, Windows 8, or Windows 8.1. If you were a user who was on Windows 7 and you went to Windows 8 or Windows 8.1, you kind of knew that that transition was a bit hard, right? And Microsoft has really taken a lot of that feedback that they've gotten from their users and from their partners like us, and they've taken that and rolled that into what Windows 10 is now to make that transition for your users much more easy. And the reason why they want to do that is because they know that if your users are able to effectively and quickly transition to Windows 10, they're going to be able to be productive and effective for you. On top of that, you're going to see then that increased productivity, whether it's tailored across a number of different types of form factors. And I'm going to save the discussion now about Cortana because I actually have a slide on it later. But really that idea that Microsoft wants to bring in a personal assistant for each of your users to help them manage their day. On top of that, Microsoft is really trying to take this theme of universal applications and enable them to scale across different types of devices, right? So whether it's on a PC or a phone or a tablet, making sure that that application experience for your users is very similar. And I can say for myself that it's been highly beneficial because the ability for me to view this data, whether I'm on my laptop or I'm on my Windows phone, has massively improved since these releases, right? On top of that, that familiar Office experience that none of us already have is only further enhanced with Windows 10 because of the built-in integration that Microsoft is really doing across each of those individual applications. And this is definitely something that I'm going to be highlighting and pointing to in that future demo that I'm going to be doing of Windows 10. And then finally, that modern browsing experience. And I'm going to save some of the deep stuff here because I have another slide on this as well. But Microsoft has really, I would say, taken a major step forward with their web browsing experience with what they call Microsoft Edge. And the reason being is because they've really tried to make it more intuitive, easy to use, but also include little features to make you more productive within it when you're browsing, right? Because I think Microsoft knows for most of us, if we're not getting information from an internal source, we're going to the web for it, right? That's where we go to first. If we're going to find pricing on a product or if we're going to find out information on a particular solution, we're going to the web first for that information. And so Microsoft wants to make that experience enjoyable, they want to make it secure, and they want to make it productive. So touching a little bit on Cortana. Now, if any of the listeners here have actually had Cortana on your Windows phone, you know exactly what it is, right? If you have, for say, example, an iPhone, then this would be similar to Siri, right? So you're able to ask a question, that response is then given. So if you say, what's the weather right now? It'll tell you it's 94 degrees and it's sunny, right? So Cortana is very similar to that in Siri. Where Cortana is really, I believe, taking another step forward, though, is that it's not just going to be something where you ask a question and it delivers that answer to you. Because what Cortana starts to do is it starts to see what's important to you based on what you're viewing. If you're in your emails a lot, looking at your calendar, what you're surfing on the web, and it starts to take that data and compile it for you. So in doing so, what it then starts to do, and I shouldn't say it, I think Microsoft would like me to say she, because they like to say it's not an it, it's a who, right? But so then she will actually start to proactively tell you what's going on with the day and what you should be aware of, right? Because she's intuitively starting to understand what's important to you, right? So if it's your calendar, she's able to tell you, hey, please be aware that you've got 15 minutes to get to this location and there's current traffic right now of about 20 minutes, so you definitely need to leave because you might be late, right? And it's been doing that for Windows phones already, Microsoft is taking that exact same experience and it's actually putting it within the Windows 10 operating system, right? So it's a really cool feature that is now available within this OS, and it really enables you to have that kind of voice recognition, voice commands built right into the Windows 10 operating system, even if you're not using it on a phone. It could be on a desktop, a laptop, or a tablet. Now, I referenced as well just a little bit ago Microsoft Edge, and this is where I was really talking about that browsing experience. And one of the things that I think is so cool about this is that Microsoft really wants you now to be able to interact with your browsing experience, not just type something in and search it or view it, but actually interact with it. And so what they're allowing you to do now is take notes directly on those web pages. So you could be circling something, highlighting, making notes, whatever that is, and then what's great is you can share or directly copy that to OneNote. So it's really enabling you to take, I would say, a greater use of what you're viewing when you're in that browsing experience, right? On top of that, it's integrated within Cortana, so you're able to get more done on the web, actually. And another thing that I think is huge is that Microsoft is really trying to optimize that viewing experience based on what device you're looking at it on. So if you're on a phone, if you're on a tablet or a laptop or a desktop, really trying to make sure that you're optimizing that experience based on whether or not you're using reading mode or another kind of mode built into it. Now, one of the things that I don't have a slide for, but I want to touch on before I get into additions and licensing, is the Start button. So if you're aware that Microsoft, if you've moved to 8 or 8.1, they've kind of brought it back a little bit. But if you've ever moved to 8, you'll know that Microsoft took the Start button away. And there was a huge outcry, I would say, across the globe of Microsoft taking this away. And so Microsoft has taken that feedback and started to reintroduce the Start menu, the Start button that's always been on the bottom left, right? It was there for XP, it was there for 7, and then suddenly in 8 it was gone, right? They brought it back for 8.1, but it wasn't really what I think people were expecting. And so Microsoft, I will say, the Start menu is not back to what it was when it was Windows 7. If that's the experience you want, you should probably stay on Windows 7, honestly, because it's going to be very different from Windows 10. But what I'd say you're getting in Windows 10 is really a new kind of Start menu that I think is more fit for the modern workforce, right? It tries to tie in that whole Metro user interface that people you either loved or you hated. It starts to tie in those applications you're using. It gives you a lot of that functionality you did have in the Start menu from Windows 7, so there's a lot of carryover that is there, but it's definitely not a one-for-one, and I want to make sure that's very clear. So that's something that in this next demo that I'm going to be doing here shortly, I'll be definitely showing you a lot of what the Start menu is, how you can utilize for it, what the benefits are, where Microsoft might still be left wanting, because as a partner, we like to kind of call it how it is, honestly, right? And so where we're expecting Microsoft to take it down the road, but those things to be aware of, so that, again, you're informed in making the right decision. So moving on from there into kind of the additions and licensing experience, right? So Microsoft really has 4 main additions. They've got the Home, they have Pro, they have Enterprise, and then they have Education. Now for most of the users here, really Home is not going to apply to you, right? Because that is for the consumer experience. If you go and buy a desktop or a laptop at Best Buy or Fry's, that's really more of that OEM or that retail side, right? Now the only reason I do have it on here is because I'm sure many of you do have your own personal systems. And if you do, that's just a good thing to be aware of, that if you have Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, based on a couple different kind of time frames and all of that, you are still eligible to upgrade for free to Windows 10. You would just be upgrading to Windows 10 Home. I'll get more kind of what that looks like later, but figured I'd throw that in right now. For most of the people on this call, I know that you're really going to care more about Windows 10 Pro and Windows 10 Enterprise, right? And each of these are really kind of tailored based on both the size of the organization, but also the needs of the organization, right? And so they're available in OEM, retail, volume licensing. So they're kind of available in each one of those, right? And then Windows 10 Education, what I would say, really, that's just Windows 10 Enterprise, but it's simplified more so in some senses for the educational market, right? Because not all of those things are necessarily applicable. Now the next slide here, I would say, does a much better job of actually telling you, okay, what are the differences between those 3 main editions, right? Well, the biggest difference I would say between Home and then Pro and Enterprise is with Home, you don't have that ability to join the domain or have group policy management, right, like you would have in Pro and Enterprise. There are other things as well, but that is definitely one of the biggest. Now, when you start getting down between the differences between Pro and Enterprise, there's a number of advanced security features, right? BitLocker, AppLocker, all of those are included within that. But there's some additional ones as well, whether it's things like MDOT or things like the hardware-based Hyper-V isolation, right? Those are additional features and functionality that you're getting within the Enterprise, that you're not getting within the Pro, right? And knowing that many of the callers that are on this webinar right now are nonprofits, the difference I can tell you in price is that for enterprise, it's usually around $109 for just the license. I believe it's around $120 for the license with software assurance. For Pro, it's about $69 for the license. Now, these are some of those additional benefits that are actually included within that Windows 10 Enterprise with software assurance. And I had said it very quickly earlier, but it's good to reiterate it, right? That within that software assurance, you're getting that virtualization benefit. You're getting those additional advanced security features like BitLocker. You're getting some additional management like the AGPM, right? That Advanced Group Policy Management, on top of things like MDOP as well, Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. Now, the different licensing and what's available within it, the reason why I have this slide up is just really to say that there's been a big change within how you can actually license Windows 10 through volume licensing. And that's actually, if you get Windows 10 with software assurance, you're actually able to now license it based on per user or per device. That's a huge change and shift in Microsoft, because actually something that used to only be the case was that Windows, the operating system, whether it was 7 or 8, was only available per device. Well, now it's available per user. Now, for sake of time, I'm not going to get heavy deep into what that means and what that looks like, because I think we could probably have a whole other webinar on what that looks like. So if you have questions around that, I would actually say reach out to your account manager or me directly right after this, because I'd be happy to kind of explain what the differences are and why you should be looking to utilize the per user option as compared to the per device option, right? Now, within this as well, Microsoft is starting to do more and more as it comes to mobile licensing, right, and specifically mobile enterprise licensing. And so one of the great things actually built in the software assurance package now is that you actually get this included with SA, whereas if you don't and you need to actually license your phones or your mobile devices, then you would actually look to purchase this as a separate license, which is available as a standalone within the open licensing model, right? So now kind of actually getting into the current upgrade plan. And this is where I really wanted to spend hopefully at least 4 or 5 minutes talking through what this actually looks like. So let's deal with it very quickly first off from the consumer standpoint. So if you're a consumer that has that Windows 7, Windows 8, or Windows 8.1, so listed right there, right? And it could be Windows 7 Home Basic or Windows 7 Home Premium, then what you're going to be able to upgrade to is to Windows 10 Home. Now here's the critical thing. You're able to do that upgrade for free, but it has to be within the first year of release to the web. What this means is really Microsoft, I would say, released it on August 1st of 2015, right? It's kind of numbers all over the place, but what I would say is you really have until the end of July of 2016 to do that free upgrade. After that point, you can still upgrade. It's not like you're locked into Windows 8 or Windows 7. It's just that you're going to have to pay for that upgrade, right? And that upgrade could come from the full package product, the retail that you might get at Best Buy or Fry's, but it could also come through volume licensing, right? So there's a major difference there just to be aware of, that you can get that free upgrade, but it's only good for a year. And I would say that the numbers kind of change, but it's really going to end in July of 2016. So you'll want to upgrade before then, right? Now, dealing with the commercial side, and this is really just from an organizational, whether you're nonprofit, corporate, academic, or government, right? So whether or not you have Windows 8 or Windows 8.1 Pro, or you have Windows 7 Pro or Windows 7 Ultimate, right? Then you're going to be able to also upgrade for free to Windows 10 Pro. Now, there's a major thing that I want to say for you on this, is that that same principle of having to upgrade within the first year to get it for free is true as well. So you can still do that, but you have to do it within that first year. Afterwards, you're going to have to upgrade via volume licensing, right? Now, there's a couple other caveats within all this that I want to make sure you're completely aware of. If you have volume licensing, you can still take that volume license of Windows 7 Pro, Windows 7 Ultimate, Windows 8, or Windows 8.1 Pro, and you can upgrade to Windows 10 Pro. There's a major thing to be aware of, though, that's a gotcha for Microsoft. When you take that volume license and you do that free upgrade, it's going to convert it from a volume license into retail. Now that's a major difference, and there's especially one key benefit that you have to be aware of that you lose when you go from volume licensing to retail, because Microsoft's converting that one license from volume license to retail. And that big thing that you're losing is the ability to take that license and move it to different systems. Let me give you a scenario that I think might help you. Let's say you have a user that their system dies, and you go ahead and you actually have another system lying around, and you want to provision that system for that user to get them up and running. Well, under volume licensing, you could take that license that was on that system that had died and transfer it over to that new machine. Under retail, you cannot do that. Under retail, Microsoft's or I would say retail licensing guidelines are that OS license stays with that system. It can't be moved around. And so that's something that you really have to be aware of, is that when you're converting it for free, you're losing that ability. Now, I actually had a call with Microsoft about this yesterday because I've had a lot of customers bring this up to me. And one of the things that Microsoft is looking at right now is to make a way that even after you convert it to retail, you can convert that license back to volume licensing. Now, I still have yet to get any kind of documentation on what this looks like or if this is truly possible. And the one thing I do know for sure is that if it is even possible, it's going to be a very painful process to do that, right? So I want to make sure you as our end users and customers are very aware that you can definitely do that free upgrade. And I would say if you don't care that it's retail or not, go for it because it's going to save you a lot of money. But you need to be aware you're going to lose some of those volume licensing benefits that you once had, right? One of those major ones is that it will now reside on that machine. Now again, Microsoft hopefully will change that back, and I'll get that documentation within that, but we don't know when that is or what that looks like. The other major thing that I want to make sure you're aware of is, for many of you, you probably have Windows Enterprise, right? It could be Windows 7 Enterprise or Windows 8 Enterprise, and you might be thinking, I don't see that on here, does that mean I can't upgrade? You're going to see some confusing information out there because Microsoft has not been very clear about this. Microsoft, you'll probably see on some websites say you cannot upgrade if you have Windows Enterprise. What they mean and what they should clarify more is you cannot upgrade if you have Windows 7 Enterprise Retail. That is not eligible for the free upgrade. However, if you have Windows 7 or Windows 8 Enterprise for volume licensing, you can upgrade, and that will take it to Windows 10 Enterprise, so that you know. So the key difference is you can do it in volume licensing, you cannot do it in retail, is my understanding. So within all of that, I'm trying to make sure I've covered everything, and I'm pretty sure I have from the upgrade plan. The only final thing I'll say is there was a slide on here of how to get there. Really, if you go to Google or Bing and just type in Windows 10 upgrade, the very first link is going to be what you need to take you for what you need to do to actually go ahead and take advantage of that upgrade. Now, the last thing I will just say is that this upgrade is done completely with Microsoft. So you as the end user, as you're doing this upgrade, you would need to leverage Microsoft support if anything does come up. We will definitely try and help out with whatever we can to expedite that, but because it really all resides with Microsoft, we're limited in what we can do, right? So I want to make sure you're very, very aware of that as well. So with that, let me see how we're doing on time. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. So let me pull up the Q&A over here and answer some questions for us. So Keith actually asked the question, if you upgrade Windows 7 Pro that uses an MAK key, is the only option to upgrade to Windows 10 Pro with an MAK key? If you apply the free upgrade, will it bomb out or not let you upgrade or do anything to your license? Well, I think, Keith, in that last little slide that I showed there, it would show that you definitely can take that Windows 7 Pro, you can definitely go ahead and upgrade it to that Windows 10 Pro. You're not going to be able to do that necessarily with an MAK key, but if you apply that free upgrade, it's not going to bomb out or anything. It's just going to convert it from that volume licensing into that retail license, right? But that transition will be just fine. You're not going to experience any issues in taking that upgrade path. Let me see if there are any other questions coming up here. Pull that down here. Let's see, Mike asks the question, I have seen the upgrade notification of machines not joined to our domain, but on none of our domain commuters. How do I upgrade them? This would be something where I would say, Mike, what you're actually going to want to look at is, and this has happened in the past as well, because what the process actually is that on your machines, you should have a Windows update, and that update actually then adds this nice little icon on the bottom of your taskbar, and that's the Windows 10 update. Now, for some end users, that has been denied because their IT managers have said, don't push out any updates without me making sure of them, right? So that's probably what's going within all of this, is that your IT manager or maybe the IT admin, or if you are the IT admin, maybe it was one of your network managers, whoever it might be, actually stopped those from automatically going through. So that's just something you would have to allow that to go through so that you would then see those on machines and be able to update that from there. Mike also asked the question, what's the deadline for upgrading? That's been communicated already, but was that July 2016 date, the end of July. Sorry about the sound, by the way. It seems like a couple people have said that the sound is going up and down. I don't know why that would be. Brian asks the question, if you don't have software assurance, can you go back and purchase it for existing licenses? Brian, the answer to that is no, you cannot. You actually have to purchase software assurance at the time that you purchase the license. It cannot be added on at a later date. Nick asks the question, does the upgrade change all the volume licenses to Windows 10? Say you can do 100 computers under one license, does it create a new license key or does it change the old one? So it will actually change the old one, and this is another major thing that, as I would say, you would need to be aware of. One of the major benefits of volume licensing is that you're able to get like one MAK key, right? And typically it's up for 50 activations. If you have more, they'll give you another one, right? But you're not going to have all these different kinds of authorization codes or product keys to actually use to activate, right? When you start to upgrade this retail, it's going to give you completely unique, for each one of those 100 computers, for example, product keys. So you're going to have, instead of now 1 or 2 product keys, you're going to have 100 product keys to manage, and that's a very good thing. I'm actually glad you asked that question, Nick, because that brought that back to mind. Nick also asks the question, can you create an upgrade on a Windows distribution server and use that to roll out the upgrade? I believe you can. That is something I would want to lean on one of my engineers for, to know exactly what that looks like, but I believe you can push that out and allow that update to actually take place and move it from there, but I'm not sure exactly what that experience looks like actually on the end user side, if anything's needed from their side, right? Let's see, Carol asked the question, we're really old school and don't use smartphones or tablets. We both have normal phones and iPads. We've only recently got 8.1. Would there be any point in upgrade? I would say for right now, the biggest thing you should probably look at, Carol, is what the Windows 10 hardware requirements are. You could type in Windows 10 system requirements, and that's going to tell you what the minimum requirements are to be able to run it effectively. If you're doing okay with 8.1, I think you'll be okay to run Windows 10, because Microsoft is really trying to make the point of their operating systems actually being lighter, right? So the whole point of that would be, if you can run 8.1, you should in theory be able to run Windows 10, but I would really stress looking at those system requirements, because just because you can run it doesn't mean it's actually going to be a good user experience, right? Dale asks the question, I'm buying a new computer that has Windows 7 Pro on it, and the company I'm buying it from said they would do the free upgrade to 10. Should I wait to do the upgrade until I get a volume license? It's really up to you on whether or not you care about that license being a volume license, or if you don't mind it being a retail, I would honestly say, Dale, because from that perspective, it really just depends on what if you're the IT manager, how you want that to be managed and what you want that to look like. Dennis asks the question, if you upgrade to Windows 10 and then you want to install new, I'm assuming a hard drive, how can you reinstall Windows 10? That's a very good question, and because that license becomes retail, that would be one that we would actually need to ask Microsoft on that, because I'm not sure how they would handle that process, truthfully. Mike then asks the question, will I run into problems with putting a Windows 10 machine on a Server 2003 domain environment? I would highly recommend that you not do that, only because of the disparity between the two environments, right? So I would recommend, yes, not putting a Windows 10 machine on a Server 2003 domain environment. That might be different if you're virtualizing that, but I would highly recommend not doing that. And then the last question I'll answer, because I know we're just a little bit over time, is from Pat. In all other OS upgrades, upgrading wiped all the programs and documents from the PC. Is that still the case? It really depends on, Pat, if you're going to do that free upgrade via Microsoft or if you're going to do it via volume licensing, and really then what you do within the volume licensing, because that's kind of dependent upon how you're managing that upgrade. What Microsoft has said, and I'm wording it that way because this is what they're telling us, is that if you do that upgrade, Microsoft will ensure that all those applications and documents are still there on that PC, so that when you start it up as Windows 10, that all of those applications and documents are still going to be there. I'm just going to tell you, I would take that with a grain of salt, right? Because to say that kind of carte blanche, point blank, I think is a pretty bold statement. So I would be very cautious in going into that. But what I'll tell you is what Microsoft has said is that they're saying that, yes, those documents and programs should be there when you finish that upgrade to Windows 10. So with all of that, I'm sorry I've gone a little bit over, but I hope this has been a good informational session for all of you. Like I said, please stay tuned for the upcoming demo that we're going to be doing, actually, that's going to show Windows 10 and the features and what it looks like. The last thing I would love to leave all of you guys with is that we actually are going to be doing a promo here at CCB for Windows 10. And so if you are looking to buy a Windows 10 device, so that could be a laptop, a desktop, a tablet, we're actually going to be offering free shipping. And I should specify it'll be free ground shipping, right? It's going to be for the entire month of September. So I believe, Dale, you were one that might be looking to buy a new computer. You might want to talk with the account manager about that actually, because we're offering free shipping across the board for any Windows 10 device for that, specifically for ground shipping is what I want to stress. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to kind of listen to this. Again, I hope it was beneficial to you guys. If there's any other questions on any of this, the last thing I'd say is just reach out to me directly. My information is right there up on the screen. You can send me an email or give me a quick call. And with that, have a great day.